listeners, if I haven't convinced you by this point to listen to this song right now, like, I don't know what else I could do.
Welcome to Therate. This was a song request from Mora. Hi, friends, longtime listener here, putting in a request for a loml podcast. Hits me in the feels every time. Keep up the great, I can't speak. Keep up the great work on the podcast. I'm having a great time listening to it. Thank you, Mora. It's so good to hear from you. Um, so Katie can definitely relate. And just as a reminder to our listeners, we are not therapy, but we are here for some fun. And Katie shared a little bit before we started recording about how this also gets her really in her feels, and she had a lot of good thoughts. And I was like, okay, stop. Let's just like start recording. And this might be a little bit different than our other podcasts, but she had some really good thoughts. So Katie, do you want to start sharing just kind of
Sure.
whatever you feel like you need to?
Sure. I'll just start talking about like what I was saying before we just started like this podcast. Thank you, Maura, for choosing the song. You know who you are. I'm right there with you. This song hits me in my feels too. Ashleigh was actually just saying that the song like So Long London will like bring her to tears, and I was like, but like not as much like loml. And I was like, oh, for me, they're like right there, neck and neck, like in terms of like the sadness. So, Maura, if you want to chime into the comments, we'd love to know what you think about that. Uh, one observation I was making is that I think that some of the songs on TTPD, like The Black Dog, tell a really tight story. It's just like, the somebody who's tracking a location, having feelings, and then writing about it. Whereas like Lamo feels like it's exploring themes. Like there's no build in the song because like musically, because it's just surrounding themes of sadness, betrayal, and I think loneliness. And there's a lot of acceptance, and it's just like I'm accepting the sadness and I'm in this very sad pit, and that's all I have to say about it. And so there are theories that the song might be about one person in particular, or that maybe the song was written about a variety of experiences over Taylor's life. But I don't think it matters so much as it is just a really good song. So to summarize, the song is just like a piano melody, and it doesn't really build, like I mentioned. It's just pretty sad, and it explores the themes that I mentioned earlier. Anything you'd add to that, Ashleigh?
Yeah, no, this is a very sad song. But yeah, for some reason I don't feel quite as emotionally connected to it. But it is like very soft piano. It feels just kind of like by your side, Taylor's at the piano, just kind of processing sadness. I don't hear as much anger
No.
in this one.
What are some of the lyrics that you're going to highlight in today's conversation, Ashleigh?
Who's gonna stop us from waltzing back into rekindled flames if we know the steps anyway? You and I go from one kiss to getting married. And still alive, killing time at the cemetery, never quite buried. What lyrics stand out to you, Katie?
Oh, so many. I think if I answered that question honestly, I would be reading the whole song. But a few lyrics that I wanted to highlight. And the questions was the lyric, a con man sells a fool a get love quick scheme. I'm combing through braids of lies. I'm better off safe than starry-eyed. And then some other lyrics that like really get me in my feels are your arsons match your somber eyes.
Yeah.
Um, and what a valiant roar, what a bland goodbye. The coward claimed he was a lion. I'm actually going to reference a TikToker that I follow that had a really interesting like perspective on those lyrics. So I'm just reading them now. Um, I also love the lyrics. I wish I could unrecall how we almost had it all. Dancing phantoms on the terrace are the secondhand embarrassed that I can't get out of bed because something counterfeits dead. And then, who's going to tell me the truth when you blew in with the winds of fate and told me I reformed you? When your impressionist paintings of heaven turned out to be fakes, well, you took me to hell too. Listeners, if I haven't convinced you by this point to listen to this song right now, like, I don't know what else I could do, or at least read the lyrics online because they're amazing.
Yeah.
But transitioning into, again, treating this song like a client, we usually start with questions we would ask. So, Ashleigh, can you take us to that part of the question?
Yeah, yeah. And I forgot to mention too, if anybody doesn't know, I don't think you mentioned this. LOML stands for love of my life. And so she starts the song saying love of my life, and then ends it with loss of my life.
Yes, I'm glad you highlighted that. Yeah. So when I say loml, I'm just like kind of pronouncing, but it's a string of letters. LOML.
Yeah. So I think that shows a picture too of like hope and then loss. So the questions I would ask, one in reference to like one kiss from we go from one kiss to getting married. What did you like about him? Like what was so like enthralling and exciting about that person that you're like, okay, like we can move fast. I wanna like plan a future with you. Um, you told me I'm the love of your life. What was it like for you to hear this? Because you said it a million times. And she kind of sounds bored when she says that, like, or like she's rolling her eyes like a million times. Um, and so I'm kind of wondering what all is behind that too. Um, what is it like for you to think of others' opinion? You mentioned the secondhand embarrassment. And it seems like this person is describing like other people's perspectives and how she was seen in the midst of this relationship. And you had a good thought about this too from the secondhand embarrassment. I'm wondering if you can share that.
Yeah. When she talks about impressionist paintings and not being able to tell that they were fake, but believing them to be authentic, it made me kind of wonder, did other people look at this art, this impressionist painting, and know it was fake to begin with? But she was convinced, and how embarrassing it might be if you bought, like, paid the actual price that an impressionist painting would be, and then everybody else around you is going, I can't believe you did that. Didn't you, couldn't you tell that this was fake? And so this idea of like maybe feeling like to blame or ashamed of you not seeing something other people were able to identify.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think she also says that I can't get out of bed. And so I'm thinking like what does that look like for you that like are we really not getting out of bed? Like what would be one step that's kind of getting into like challenges or recommendations too? Like what is one step toward
Mm-hmm.
processing or moving forward? But also it's okay that you can't get out of bed because
Mm-hmm.
this clearly had a deep meaning to you. Um, and then her line should have let it stay buried. How do you know? What do you regret? And then what do you need to find closure?
Cool. That question, how do you know? That's an insightful question. How do you know it should have stayed buried? Like that there's a story.
Hmm.
Very insightful question, Ashley.
Thank you. What questions do you want to ask?
Well, starting with an observation, the song slash client seems to be processing some sort of desire or desires that ended in loss and grief. So that makes me wonder, what are the desires of your heart that you seem to be seeking in these relationships or relationship? And I noticed that you believed when your partner or partners told you things. So let's dig into this. Was it a wholehearted belief? Was there a gut reaction or a small, even like tiny part of you that questioned it? Was there any part of your gut that maybe you ignored or you answered away or you, I don't know. And I think that in asking that question, what I'm not doing is assigning blame because that's not neither here nor there, and it's not a useful thing. But rather, it's more about recognizing what part of yourself that you may be out of touch with and need to reconnect with. Um, And if it is a wholehearted belief and this completely blindsided you and you never saw this coming, then let's talk about that too. Um, so just kind of getting into the nuance of the the bigness of the feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. What would you validate?
I would validate that it's a common and normal experience for us to give our love and loyalty to those who are undeserving. Because we may not have known at the time that we gave our loyalty and love that that person didn't deserve it. And we found that out the hard way. People that have lied, betrayed, harmed us, or shown no remorse or interest in changing, these are complex and nuanced situations that we should process on a case by case situation. But in these situations, we may have to redirect our love to people and places that actually value the love and the value that we have to offer.
Mm,
And so it can be a common experience for somebody to turn their questioning on themselves and view themselves as the problem. Like, I'm to blame because I believed somebody. And all that does is tear us down and tear us apart. And what would it be like to look at the part of you that desired what you thought you saw in this person and say that desire is still good, but the person turned out to not be good, or at least the relationship turned out not to be good, and to differentiate between those things because I think it can get really muddy really fast.
hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much there. I really like what you said about being valued. And I think
How
that's
did you find
so
out about it?
important. Well, I think it goes back to what we talked about with the black dog too, right? Like if this person is not going to value you, how much do you put into that relationship? Um, and you're normalizing that it's common
Mm-hmm.
to experience putting forth effort for people who maybe don't see it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that goes into your, question too of you know, how do you know?
Yeah.
How could you have known? How, into really taking that question quite seriously without moving into the self blame or a spiral.
Hmm.
Are there any recommendations that you would offer, Ashley?
Yes, if it's okay, I'm going to do some validation too.
Yeah.
So like reactions to loss, I think
Mm-hmm.
that, staying in bed sometimes is what's needed, right? Like take a day,
Yeah.
chill. Don't spend time with people that you're worried are judging you right now, right? Like don't completely isolate yourself forever, but if you need to chill and just be yourself, have some introvert time, as I like to call it, that's okay. It's also common and okay to accept the fact that you regret things that have been done or said after heartbreak, or in general. It's okay to realize that maybe you would have done some things differently, um, and kind of evaluate what you might change in the future,
Mm-hmm.
um, as long as it's not like holding you back. If that's what's holding you in bed, then that's something that needs to be processed differently. Um, but, and then I would also say it's good and healthy to have hope for your longings. Like if we don't have dreams or longings or things pushing us forward, or, pushing is kind of intense, but dreaming in general, right? That can be really helpful to have. And it's okay that they were there, even if it didn't turn out the way you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. No, I really appreciate all of that insight.
Yeah. So recommendations wise, I said engage with regret. What did you learn? What would you look for in the future? And find something to do that feels life-giving, maybe not involved with people.
Mm, take a break from rest from relationships or social social effort.
Yeah.
Can I just like observe that I really like how you talked about regret and like sitting with your regret. And I think that, or I just know that regret is a very uncomfortable emotion.
Hmm.
And so the fact that you like normalized and encouraged like the interaction with that instead of avoiding it or denying it, or getting defensive or anything else, it's just I have these regrets, and this is part of my sadness is like my own involvement and making myself sad, like choices I made that helped get me here.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What recommendations did you have?
Yeah, and there's a lyric that says, "I'm better off safe than starry-eyed," and that lyric really caught my attention because I just want to ask, what does it mean? Sometimes what I observe with clients, people, myself, is that there's a tendency to hate desire because it leads or has led at times to disappointment, as opposed to learning to love our desire because it it enables us to hope, right? But hope is really risky. And so, in line with what you said, um, my recommendation would be to learn to create a relationship to your desire. And what I mean by that is learning how to recognize it, get excited by it, get motivated by it, and learn to hold it with flexibility so that when that desire doesn't come true, that you can interact with that disappointment but not see the desire as the problem. A therapist that I really respect once said that the outcome of our lives will be determined by how we choose to relate to our desires and our disappointments. And I have found that to be a very, I think I've quoted that before in a podcast, but like that has just been like a guiding statement in my life. Um,
Hmm.
and so that's where I see it tying in to like, I'm better off safe than starry eyed. Like, what is safety? What is starry eyed? What does that represent to you? What are you saying is better than the other?
Yeah. It's such a sad lyric.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it
Yeah.
really is. I mean, it makes me wonder about like youthfulness. We talk about being starry-eyed as a youthful thing. You
Mm.
know, sometimes security is seen as something that, like, when we're older, we seek security. Like, is this speaking to age? Is this speaking to desire, disappointment? Like, is safety being alone as opposed to being in relationship? Like, it's so open to interpretation here.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. I love that you pulled that out. I had assumed meaning to that. So I think that's really cool that you allow openness.
Thank you. What meaning did you assign to it? I'm actually curious about that now.
Um, yeah, kind of like um I kind of picture somebody who's maybe on like a high dive at a pool and is choosing to go back down the ladder instead of jumping. Like, why have the hope of something to be exciting or good or fun when I can just stay on solid ground
Mhm.
after this experience? Like, it just makes me feel sad for that person. But yeah, it's uh, basically like having hope and excitement versus just like staying stagnant.
Mhm.
Not that safety is bad. Safety is good.
Yeah, no, it definitely is good, right? But like when our window of tolerance, which is kind of what we use in therapy speak to say like your ability to tolerate risk or change or difference or something like that, like when it shrinks and like you're not able to tolerate anything that challenges you in some way or is uncomfortable for you, that really narrows your life experiences to something quite small that has to be like very strictly controlled as opposed to a flexibility and openness to experiencing a lot of different things. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's interesting. There's so many different interpretations like you highlighted. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything you would challenge?
Yeah. So this is something we mentioned earlier in the podcast, but this client might be experiencing secondhand embarrassment that she just can't get out of bed. And I wonder if there's judgment or shame around that. So one of the lyrics says, "Con man sells a fool a get love quick scheme. And it seems to be that the author of the song is um, saying, I'm the fool, and that there was a con man, and I thought that this get love quick scheme, like, so I was kind of like a fool for buying, and this person was a con for selling, kind of like on both sides. And and then I want to explore, in what ways do you feel like you are a fool? How do you relate to yourself when you've been betrayed or when you've been manipulated? A really common response is to blame yourself. How did I not see this coming? Or I must have missed the signs. What's wrong with me? And I think we really need to use discernment and explore where you may have ignored a gut feeling. Like, if there actually are signs that you ignored, let's be honest about that and not try and say, like, oh, you never could have seen it coming. If a part of yourself did. And at the same time, being so kind, so compassionate, and recognizing that you were also deceived. So it can be a both and. Sometimes we're fully deceived and sometimes we're partially deceived, but we participated in it by, like, giving quick answers or like kind of brushing aside certain concerns that maybe we had or questions or doubts. And you can make space for both. And that would be my challenge, is to make space for both of those things without it having to be a binary one or the other.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we often like to categorize things and kind of push away the things that we don't want or don't like, and then accept the things that we do like or do want. And you're kind of saying like allowing both to exist.
Yes, yes. Because it can, like you said, we can either go for, like, okay, I was deceived, like it's all on them, I had no idea. Or we can be like, well, it's on me, I should have seen it coming, something's wrong with me. Like, and it's rarely ever that, or not, I wouldn't say maybe even rarely, but like it's not always the case. Like, we have to allow for it to be a mix of both. And that's a tension. It's uncomfortable to sit in.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely is. But the tension is so healthy also.
Yes. The tension is where growth happens.
Oh, yeah. So good. I also had a couple of things to challenge. It seems like this person is finding their identity in romantic relationships. So, one thing I want to challenge via a question is, where else are you finding your sense of self? Um, which by that I just mean like your identity. Where do you find like your uh, self-esteem, your yeah, I think I covered it. Um, And then, is this the loss of your life right now, or do you feel this way with every relationship?
Ooh, that's a very challenging question. Can you say more?
I think I think this person is talking about a very fresh ending. And when things are very fresh, it feels like that loss is like the deepest thing that could have ever been experienced. Like, to say this is the loss of my life, like when I hear that, I hear, even when I'm 85 years old, I'm going to be remembering how deep of a loss this was for me and wishing
Mhm.
it were different.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
Like,
explicitly said, and I'll see it until I die. You're the loss of my life. So you're 100% right.
thank you for pulling that lyric. You're the best. Um, so I I guess with my therapist hat on, is this a pattern? Like, do we always feel this way? Do we put so much in, like all of our chips in for each relationship that we're in, no matter what that relationship looks like? Or is this something that, like, what was different about this relationship specifically that makes this one the one that you're going to be thinking about until you die?
Mhm.
Um, so it seems like maybe more, I can't think of the word, like passion or effort or something along those lines is being put into romantic relationships than is maybe healthy.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, kind of asking, like, let's evaluate for a second. Do they all feel this way? Is this one's kind of different, and kind of nuancing between that? And I think that's always good to be aware of patterns that could be emerging. that might be true? Is that just something that's true about you as a person? Is this something that we need to explore? Is this something we need to encourage? Like, what is it? We don't know
Mm-hmm.
yet, but just create curiosity around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, is there anything else that you would encourage?
Um, Encouragement wise, I would say being at a place where you can see the situation clearly and summarize it shows that you are like taking steps towards healing
Hmm. Hmm.
and there is hope.
Yes, yes,
How
yes,
about you?
absolutely. Yeah, I like that you mentioned hope because I actually don't hear a lot of hope in this song. So it's like I'm just like speaking something that like you're not there yet, but I'm gonna hold this for you until you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I really like that you said that. Similarly to you, this song seems to be closing the chapter on really a relationship or relationships. And I just want to validate and encourage that some things have to be processed and then set aside. So, not like a discarded, numbing, avoiding, ignoring kind of way, but but in the way where you revisit painful things, you come back to the present and you move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I see this song doing. Like the song does not rush the sadness whatsoever. And if there's one thing that we know to be true about grief is grief has her own timeline. And it's certainly not ours. And
Mm-hmm.
it's frequently much longer than we want, and it affects us in ways that we're not comfortable with. And that's part of the acceptance of like grief is going to come and do its work in you, and you don't get to decide
Yeah.
how long that process goes or what it looks like. You're there to receive, not to direct.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the song does this really well. Um, there's a certain phrase that this is kind of like deviating a little bit from like the encouragement, but just going rogue, like we talked about doing on this episode.
Yes. Let's
I
go
would
rogue.
love to process with you the phrase combing through braids of lies, because I think this is such a clever line because you cannot comb through braids. It also implies that there were multiple lies being told.
Yeah.
And it's implying betrayal. Like we are betrayed when we're lied to, like told one thing, it's not true. So when you're helping somebody navigate betrayal in some sense, the natural instinct for a person is to go back and figure out what was truthful, what was a lie. And I'm curious, like as a therapist, how do you help? Like, what are your thoughts on that? This idea of like going back to like identify what was true and what wasn't.
Yeah. Being a therapist is so hard in those situations because you get one person's perspective.
Yeah. Yep.
So you, our job in those situations is to help the person we're working with to kind of come to a point where they feel like they have processed their feelings, experienced closure. We won't really know. And that, again, you're sitting in a lot of tension, both as a therapist and the client, more importantly, is sitting in the tension of like, I still don't know
Mhm.
what was real about that situation.
Yeah. Or maybe you do. Maybe you find out on the other side of
Yeah.
like, this proves that, like I have a text or I have a photo or I have this person actually directly told me or something.
Hmm.
You know it was a lie. Like you caught it boldly, like
Yes.
out in the open.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in this situation, the idea of like I'm combing through braids of lies, it's like you can't comb through a braid and like it's plural, so there's like multiple and it's just all woven together. So I kind of imagine that like truth and lie was woven, and then you're trying to like pull it apart and like how does one actually do that? Like it's going to be messy. This will probably create snarls or like picks in your hair, right, as you're trying to comb out something. So I
And
think
so much effort.
it's so much effort and it's a painful one and it's a messy one. So the imagery was just like really captivating to me there. Um, and again, just speaks to like the betrayal. And then kind of along with that, there's this one lyric that says, "Our field of dreams engulfed in fire, your arsons match your somber eyes. And I'll still see it until I die. You're the loss of my life." This gets me right in my feels. Our field of dreams engulfed in fire, your arsons match your somber eyes. Like calling somebody an arson. They have a match in their hand and their eyes are somber. Like just that imagery is very gripping. Like you're just calling it out. And again, like in a lot of her music, we hear anger. And in this song, I don't hear anger. It's just like, you're an arson. Like those were our dreams. That was a field of dreams that like we cultivated together and you lit them up. And then you're looking at me and I'm looking at you. Like your eyes are somber as you do it. And there's just something very chilling about that imagery. Like it's not, it doesn't speak to like in a moment of heated passion, I set fire to something, or like I was like there's like a oh, like a plan, like arsons plan their crimes. Like it's just very, very chilling to me. And
Yeah.
like that kind of gripping imagery with like, and I'll still see it. Like I'll never not see that you're the loss. That that feels complex.
Yeah, kind of like that image has been burned into her mind.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Literally burned into wow. Okay. I just love the way you said that. That was like, yes, you got it. That's it exactly.
Hmm.
And then I kind of mentioned at the top of the episode that there was a TikToker that I follow, and his name is Tobias Asner. So it's at Tobias Asner, and he has got great insight into this song. And so this is where I like I'll reference what he says, but like for our listeners, if you don't know the song, I'd encourage you to listen to it because he highlights a play on words, how they're written versus how they sound. So towards the end of the song, the lyrics go, "Oh, what a valiant roar, what a bland goodbye. The coward claimed he was a lion." So when you read those lyrics, they sound like how I just read them. But when you hear them, bland goodbye, when she sings it in the song, if you don't read the lyrics, kind of sounds like planned goodbye. And then coward claimed he was a lion, kind of sounds like claimed he wasn't lying. And I was like, a planned goodbye wasn't like, claimed he wasn't lying. Like, so that speaks to denial. So, like, again, is this just a coincidence? Or did Taylor actually mean to write one thing, knowing that it could sound like something else that also like is alluded to?
It, so yes, I don't know. We don't know. I think sometimes Taylor gets more credit for things like this than she can plan for. It is crazy the amount of things that happen for her that
Mhm.
like are similar to this, right? That like even if they were planned, super cool. If they weren't, like what are the odds that these things happen?
Yeah.
So if she did, absolute crazy genius. If she didn't, still super cool.
Yes. Yes, agreed. Totally agree. And I'm with you. I do feel like, the millions of people that are fans around the world are bound to find certain things just because brains work differently. And then we have like pattern recognitions, and then people just come to their own conclusions. Like, I'm sure there are things that like she gets credit for that like she didn't intend. It just kind of like worked out that way. This
Hmm.
one does make me wonder, though. Like, it,
Yeah.
it kind of does, simply because there is such a joke in Swiftie like culture of when lyrics sound different than what they are. So like a very famous one is the song Blank Space on 1989, where like got a long list of ex-lovers, but like everybody heard that it's got a list of Starbucks lovers, which makes no sense, but like how funny it was that like, and so there's just like, or Lavender Haze, 11 turkeys creeping up on me. Like, so it is kind of a joke how like what the lyrics are written as and then what they sound like, which is why it kind of makes me wonder if that was a little bit of a play here, and Tobias is right, but we'll never know. But it's a fun thought to consider because if it is, then that really does layer the idea that like the goodbye was bland, like it was just like I think it's something bland and it's just like there's nothing significant to it, but this relationship was obviously very significant. And then like calling somebody like the coward in the lion makes me think of like Wizard of Oz, the cowardly lion, right? But claiming to be brave when you weren't brave, and then also you're saying that you didn't lie, and this cowardice is like a word and a theme that gets applied in other songs on the album as well. So I think cowardice is just like a really big thing that she like sees in this person now
Mm.
after the relationship has ended. So
Yeah. Yeah. Since we're going rogue, before we wrap up, there's one more thing I wanted to say. Um, the lines still alive, killing time at the cemetery, never quite buried, remind me of the conversation we had in the So Long London episode too, of like I kind of picture her like standing in this grave of like, are we done? Are we not? And then in So Long London, it's like it's over.
yeah.
Um, which I don't know if she's like just using the imagery for two different situations or if they are connected at all. She talks about it too in How Did It End?
Oh yeah.
Which that's special shout out to How Did It End?
Yeah. Oh, maybe we need to cover that song.
I wondered if this would happen, if we would get done with TTPD and be like, well, actually.
Yeah, we're not quite ready to be done with TTPD yet.
I want to
Yeah.
look up those lyrics really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because what she says is really clever, always.
Oh, clever.
The bridge. Say it once again with feeling, how the death rattle breathing, silenced as the soul was leaving, the deflation of our dreaming, leaving me bereft and reeling. My beloved ghost in me, sitting in a tree, Dying.
Oh, yes. That one also really gets me in my feelings.
It feels so connected. I mean, there's so many like death references. So
Yeah.
stay tuned, listeners. We're not sure if we're covering that song yet or not, but either way, highly recommend listening because wow, it's really good.
Yes.
So thanks for joining us and for this recommendation, Maura. Katie, did you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, that's it. I just want to say thank you to Jeremy for uh, editing. As always, thank you to our listeners, and we look forward to seeing you at the next episode.
Yeah, so feel free to request songs if you want to through our email, theratepodcast@gmail.com, or you're welcome to follow us on Instagram, Therate Podcast. All right, have a good day.